Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The public speaks on voter ID. A deal seems reached on keeping the lottery honest. And could bikers taste the freedom of not wearing helmets in North Carolina? Good evening. Thanks for watching. I'm Kelly McCullen. Our top story covers voter ID. House Republicans held the first public hearing on that issue this week. It's part of the GOP schedule that leaders say will lead to legislation in just weeks. Step one of the House Republican plans for voter ID legislation was to hold a public hearing phase. This week, the House Elections Committee heard hours of testimony on why voter ID was both necessary and unnecessary.
So we're here today to say, don't try to fix it, don't try to make it softer, don't make it slicker, don't compromise. Disenfranchisement in any color, in any way is wrong. This new voter poll tax disguised as voter ID is wrong. It's wrong according to your own Constitution, which says all elections must be free. The Bible you swore on to come into office says that woe unto those who make unjust laws. But finally, let me say, this misinformation that you are feeding the North Carolina public about fraud is dangerous. It's dangerous because it brings up all kinds of nasty emotions.
What this issue is about, together with any forthcoming legislation, is ensuring that the personal details of individuals who wish to be registered to vote are true and verifiably so.
Opponents of voter photo ID say over 500,000 North Carolinians would lose voting access.
The North Carolina Board of Elections recently reported that as many as 1 in 10 voters may not have a valid and current state-issued photo ID. That's more than 600,000 North Carolinians who could be prevented from voting by strict photo ID requirements.
Voter ID supporters offered their own statistics about some of North Carolina's county voter registration rolls.
Our first project was to match the census data for each county's voting age population with the voter registration polls, and we found, amazingly, one county had 106 of their registered voter, 106% of their voters registered. That was Yancey County. Clay was right behind them with 103. There were 23 counties that had over 90% of their voter population, or voter density as we call it. The national average is 67%, so woohoo, North Carolina's doing well, right? No, we draw another conclusion. We believe that the election board is padding the voter rolls.
Hours of voter ID public feedback are now on the record. House Republicans say they are welcoming this input and welcome opponents to their table, but it's clear the majority party has the votes to push most any voter ID bill it fancies. Barry Smith with the Carolina Journal is here, and you were at the voter ID public hearing. What did you make of it?
Well, there were a lot of people who were against it, who came to speak. I would say they probably outnumbered the proponents of the voter ID 4 to 1, maybe 5 to 1. They were definitely much more organized, and a lot of them said the same thing, but a lot of them brought up different points too. You know, there were people who were older people who had to really fight for the right to vote, and or at least were not allowed, used to not even be allowed to vote, and or had to go through, you know, some of the literacy tests and that sort of thing, and you know, they were definitely against it.
If you said 4 to 5 to 1 would be probably 80% would be against it at that particular public hearing. Polls I've seen are almost the opposite. Are the polls wrong, or was this just the motivated turnout of people who don't like voter ID?
I think it was more of that, the motivated turnout. I don't think the polls are wrong. I think a lot of people in the general public, most people that I talk to, you know, hey, I just had to show my ID to buy a beer. I just had to show my ID to get into this building. A lot of people that you talk to, they don't see what's wrong with having to show an ID to vote.
You know, looking at this broader issue and the Republican supermajorities, Barry, they can do what they want.
They can.
Why have a public hearing when when the partisan debate, the party debate is over on this?
It is over. It is always good to give people an opportunity to vent. You know, if you vent, it's better to vent than to have, you know, more serious civil problems. And I think it's a smart move even though I do think that probably a lot of what's going to be in the bill, they probably already know what's going to be in there. I mean, I know I did a story on this several weeks ago before the session got underway in earnest, and I was talking to Representative David Lewis, and he said, well, there's only so much we can do because we want to make sure what we pass is constitutional and will pass muster. We do not want to spend all this time on a bill and then have it declared unconstitutional and not enforceable.
It sounds like the Republicans are expecting the lawsuit to be filed the minute that bill would become law, if they can get it into law.
Well, they're expecting, and for good reason. There were several people at the public hearing who said, we will file a lawsuit. Now, they said similar things when the Republican majority a couple years ago was doing redistricting, and yes, they filed a lawsuit. There's no reason not to believe that a lot of the opponents will not file lawsuits. They've been filed in other states, and it will happen when it's done in North Carolina. I don't usually guarantee a lot of things, but that's one thing I can guarantee.
Now, looking at both sides, the pro and the con grassroots side of this, the pro voter ID people, very confident?
They're very confident. They think it's going to happen. There's at least a perception that there's a significant amount of voter fraud out there that they're not able to stop, and they feel like that this will at least help identify it, if not prevent it.
Will the opponents of voter ID try to sway this legislation as it's written? Do they wait for it to possibly become law and then try to stop it in court?
Well, I think there will be some efforts to sway it, to make some changes, to maybe lessen the restriction. I doubt that will happen, but you know, that's why they actually do the bill.
In the broad sense, is there any real difference between the House, the Senate, and the governor's vision on voter photo ID?
Well, the governor has said that, you know, he can accept something less than a real strict photo ID, but he's going to let the details be worked out by the General Assembly. I would expect to see that happen. I don't know. There's something that's kind of cropped up which some Democrats have actually pushed, and some people at the public hearing said, if you don't have a photo ID, let them take your photo at the polling place, and then they've got your picture on file if you're voting fraudulently. You know, I don't know the details on how that would be worked out, how expensive that would be, if that's possible. That's one thing that could be worked out in the future.
Barry Smith, Carolina Journal. Google him. Easiest way to find him. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Voter ID concerns state and federal identification, but the Mexican government issues ID cards to Mexican immigrants in North Carolina. Onslow County Representative George Cleveland has questioned the legitimacy of the Mexican government's ID verification process. He wants these embassy documents disallowed as a legitimate form of ID for state and local government use.
The main problem with these cards is they have absolutely no, I should say, validity. They don't have a database. When they're issued, nobody checks them to see who, in fact, they're issuing the card to. An individual can show up at a distribution point.
We spoke with the Mexican consulate, and they actually, when two names come in that are even similar from the 50 different consulates that are across our country, they put a stop on that document to make sure that they're actually issuing it to the correct person.
A House Judiciary Committee approved a scaled-back lottery bill aimed at keeping lottery advertising, quote, honest. Some leading House Republicans believe lottery players are being misled, if inadvertently, about the odds of winning the jackpot. House Republican leaders, lottery officials, and Democrats were on the same page regarding the so-called honest advertising that's conducted by the North Carolina Education Lottery. The Honest Lottery Act was scaled back so it could focus on educating lottery players about their true odds of winning the jackpot.
The reasons that 43 states are in the lottery business are to make money for good causes, for us education, and to make certain that games are operated with honesty and integrity and are provided in an efficient manner.
Some lawmakers think lottery players are fooled by the jackpot totals, that people don't realize the advertised cash winnings are much lower if they choose a lump sum payment. There's also the worry about odds of winning and that citizens might consider the lottery an investment plan.
We believe that if you're going to raise money in this way, that you should at least be honest with the bettors as to what their odds are. And that's the thrust of this bill, what the probabilities are. And if people at least have the information, they're more likely to make a good decision than if they have the wrong information.
Democratic Representative MICHAUX supports simpler, easier to understand lottery ticket information, but He's skeptical that people don't realize what they're doing when they buy a lottery ticket.
To give more explanation so that folks would have more of an explanation of it, sure, that's fine, no problem with that. And it's like I told them, I don't think people who buy tickets, I think they understand the odds, and if they sell the true odds and true figures, then they may back off, but I haven't seen anybody do it yet.
The bill is making its way towards full House debate. Now, about the odds of it passing, we'll leave that to others. State Commerce Secretary Sharon Decker outlined the McCrory administration's job creation and recruiting philosophy earlier this week. It takes a local approach but preserves some elements of recruitment that make the now leading Republicans uneasy. North Carolina's Secretary of Commerce Sharon Decker outlined the next new vision for the state's economy. It includes so-called traditional economic sectors.
And when I look at what we have to work with, I see manufacturing, I see agriculture, I see a very strong military presence in our state. I see an opportunity to grow small business and to encourage entrepreneurship.
The 2012 gubernatorial campaign was influenced by a slogan suggesting our state was broken and that North Carolina's economic recruiting strategies have not worked in recent years when Democrats control state government, an opinion that's disputed.
We've been through what, in my opinion, is pretty close to a depression. Not a recession, but a depression. I think if you hadn't had stopgaps, we probably would have been in a depression. So recruiting something in the last 4 or 5 years has been a challenge, period. I don't care who's running it.
Commerce Secretary Decker says job creation is a grassroots movement that needs state backing.
Although the state has a role to play in policy, the state has a role to play in tax reform, the state has a role to play in guiding this process, economic growth happens at a community level.
But economic incentive packages are largely state-funded, and it appears a change in gubernatorial administration will not change the policy of offering cash incentives for companies to relocate.
Well, it's a classic issue when you're providing state funds, taxpayers' dollars, to a private enterprise. You look like you're in the position of picking winners and losers, who you would like to be your neighbor and who you would rather stay away. And that's really not the business government or a role government should be playing.
The House Transportation Committee is discussing the need for North Carolina's motorcycle helmet law. Does the 45-year-old safety mandate protect all taxpayers from covering injured bikers' medical bills, or does it injure a biker's freedom of choice? That's the question. North Carolina has required bikers to wear helmets since the late 1960s. Now, motorcyclist and state representative John Torbett says it's unfair to make mandates on bikers that aren't made on pedestrians and other vehicle drivers.
People riding cars and driving cars wear helmets, they'd be safer. And think of all the fatalities in car accidents across the country we might be able to save if drivers wore helmets.
Torbett's original bill would have exempted bikers over 18 years old from the mandatory helmet law if they'd held a motorcycle endorsement over 1 calendar year. But Republicans who are sympathetic to the Torbett bill on relaxing helmet mandates pushed that age up to 21 years old, the same as helmet optional South Carolina.
I had concerns, and I have a big concern at 18. I think there's a few more good decisions made at 21 than 18. There's plenty of bad decisions made when you're 45 or 65 or whatever, but there are more good decisions, and I think the drinking age, I believe, is 21.
But supporters of preserving the helmet law were heard, including a trauma surgeon who says helmets protect motorcyclists' health and taxpayer pocketbooks.
We think that the consequences, the burden of cost both on the patient, their family, and the people of North Carolina when a patient is injured have long-term ramifications that may involve long-term support from the state, from disability.
Other opponents step forward to say North Carolina's helmet law is a safety and financial win-win.
North Carolina, since its inception of its law in 1968, has come out #1 in saving lives and #2 in saving money.
But helmet law repeal supporters say their critics conduct these studies with a point of view or opinion bias, and that diminishes any reports that helmets are as effective as claimed.
And if you have an agenda or an opinion before you start your study is likely to come out with the results that you want.
House Bill 109 would place no limit on a motorcyclist's choice to wear a helmet. The choice would be legally not to wear headgear. Also, any bikers under 21 years old would be required by law to wear helmets.
We're not saying do not wear helmet. My guess is that a safety instruction would say you would be better off wearing a helmet. We're just giving you the freedom.
The bill remains in the House Transportation Committee. A bill to remove the speed governors from school buses was discussed this week. Debate centered on trusting our bus drivers to run at 45 with kids on board, yet allow them to match highway speeds when the bus is empty. If North Carolina's school buses did not feature those mechanical speed limiters or governors, would you trust your bus driver to drive 45 miles per hour when kids are on board? That was the question posed to the House Transportation Committee this week.
Doesn't change any of the existing rules for school bus travel and school bus limits for when the school bus contains children. None whatsoever. This addresses the issue of unoccupied buses that are on the highways.
Representative Mark Brody's bill is a half-page long. It's easy to read. When school buses contain students, the top bus speed would be 45 miles per hour. Once the bus is empty of students, the driver could drive the posted speed limit. But Republicans and Democrats say drivers would most certainly speed.
Once the governors are off, then they're off. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a school bus driver and they're running behind, and they're in a hurry because he's got to get home, because he's got somewhere to go, he's got something to do, and they're going to creep up over the speed limit, and it's just human nature.
The Mecklenburg County delegation was split over allowing faster but empty school buses on our highways. Representative Charles Jeter says school buses, by being so slow, can create driving hazards.
If you are going 45 miles an hour on an interstate, and the speed limit is 65 miles an hour, you are causing greater harm to that school bus and to the residents of our communities by forcing them to go that slower speed limit. So we're not suggesting that they could go 70, 80 miles an hour. We are trying to suggest they travel at a safe speed.
Mecklenburg County Representative Becky Carney says it's all those other drivers out there that could negatively affect school bus speeds if no governors are in place.
How is that bus driver going to control his foot if traffic is pushed up behind him? He's doing 45 and he's pushed to go 55. I just don't see the need for it.
So the debate was clear. Slow school buses can cause safety issues on highways. But if school buses are allowed to run the speed limit when empty, well, that could present safety issues. The full House approved a common standard for public school wireless internet services. State education leaders would assess the technology needed to create a, quote, robust digital learning environment while crafting acceptable Wi-Fi standards for the classroom. Every North Carolina public school's internet connectivity would be charted and presented to lawmakers. The House approved higher felony charges for child abusers. That could mean more prison time. Future child abuse convicts would have their permanent records marked that their victim was a minor.
Two of the goals of the criminal justice system are to deter future bad behavior, specifically or generally, and another one is to incapacitate people who we have fear of and who there's no other way to handle.
This bill would come online December 1st, 2013. Representative Craig Horns, a Republican from Union County who wrote Kyla's law. Thanks for being on the show, by the way.
Thanks very much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Tell me about this. You're going to elevate the felony charges for anybody who abuses a child. Will it deter people from abusing a child?
A great question and difficult question to answer, because we always wonder how much of a deterrence is incarceration. We would like to think that if they get time to think about it and we get time, we the public get time to work with them, that it will be a deterrent. We hope so here.
Child abuse cases, I don't know that much about them. I know that nobody likes them. Are these impulse attacks or are they premeditated?
It's my view that child abusers act serially. Problem that is, if you hit a child once, you'll hit a child again. And it's also my experience just generally in the public that you tend to discipline your children the way you were disciplined. If you come out of a difficult home where there was physical abuse, you'll tend to be an abuser. So the problem for us is we don't know how serial child abusers are because of how we have coded child abuse convictions. This bill takes care of that as well.
When you say protecting children, you can take an abuser and have them think about an increased felony charge they could face if they were to beat this child, or you just lock them up longer, which keeps them out of circulation in the general society. What's the aim?
The aim is both. The aim is to take them off the streets, protect the child, to protect the family, and to give that person a reason to think twice.
if someone attacks me, hits me full in the face, I can defend myself. But a child is defenseless. Adults need to think about that, think long and hard about it, and we need to change that culture in our society of acting things out.
Spankings. When you elevate charges, do you elevate the what is a child abuse claim?
That was one of the biggest challenges in writing this bill in the first place. We want to ensure that parents still be allowed to be parents and to discipline their children appropriately. So that's why we left the misdemeanor right in place, so that an aggressive spanker could be, let us say, dealt with without making them a felon. But those that consciously, or maybe not even consciously, but those that purposely injure a child, permanently injure a child in particular, they've got to be put away.
Let's lighten up the conversation and look towards some of your digital learning initiatives. Roll these bills together and kids are going to move away from the textbooks, or at least their textbooks will be complemented by tablets, laptop computers, whatever the tech is in the next 5 or 6 years. Internet access coming for the schools, a common standard, so you got a good speed. The only question I have is, how do you pay for it? In that lottery for you, the Senate says they may free up state funds if Senator Jerry Tillman can be believed. What do you think?
Well, I think that we will free up a lot of state funds as we move more into the digital environment in schools. Textbooks are an expensive investment, and they're out of date the moment they're put into a child's hands. The ability to deliver education is the key issue here. We have an opportunity for the first time in over 120 years to change how we deliver education. With the move to a digital education environment, we'll be able to deliver the finest education in the world to the poorest and most rural child in this state. And we can lead the nation in doing that.
And you're leading the legislature, 6 passed bills into law. Not bad for, I mean, statistically, people think it's easy to pass a bill. You're getting kudos within your own caucus about getting this done. How you doing?
Well, you do it with a lot of homework. You know, there's a story about how long it takes to be an overnight success. Most of these bills we started working on last May. We worked through the summer. We were very collaborative about developing these bills, and not just the digital education bills, but all 6 of these bills. We brought in all the players, all the people we thought would be or could be impacted, and got all of them to participate in the process. So we had a pretty good chance, a better chance, of course, going in because of the time we'd taken, the diligence in the collaboration.
Thank you, Representative Horn, for being on Legislative Week in Review.
Thank you.
House Republican efforts to ban teenagers from tanning salon beds rolled through committee this week. The debate has focused on science in recent weeks, but this week the discussion in part turned to the principle of government involvement in a private person's decision to indoor tan. House legislation to ban minors from using tanning beds at tanning salons seemed to gain momentum this week. Many Republicans who ran on a small government platform say the scientific data shows a ban like this is necessary.
I think, the health care behind it is very solid, and as I shared with committee, I have a personal experience with a young lady who has experienced, a melanoma from this. So I think it has the health care concerns, but I also think it has the principal concerns on how we regulate these things.
The American Sun Tanning Association's Joseph Levy says people like the sun, they like the light and laying out, despite any proposed law.
It's just going to drive people into home units and into more unregulated environments, tanning more aggressively outdoors, that this will increase injury, not decrease it, that's what's going to happen in the real world where the rubber meets the road.
While this bill would keep teens out of professional tanning salons, the legislation does not regulate tanning beds inside the home.
You're not going to tell people that something that is an essential element of life should just be avoided completely. That's just bad public health policy.
Less government is certainly a mantra that we try to live by, but I think in this instance it's something that is a good piece of legislation that to regulate this industry is the smart thing to do for everyone.
The Senate voted this week to lift the city of Charlotte's control of the Charlotte-Douglas International Airport. A new multi-county airport authority could be created, giving a regional voice to an airport cherished by Charlotte alone. The world's 6th largest airport is Charlotte, North Carolina's Charlotte-Douglas International Airport. The city of Charlotte oversees it, but Senate Bill 81 would shift that authority to a brand new commission called the Charlotte Regional Airport Authority.
Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton and his Committee on Economic Study of North Carolina made a recommendation that yes, indeed, the airport and the intermodal park is a very critical component to the economy of North Carolina and should not be under the control of any municipality, and actually recommended a regional authority for that effort.
The proposed airport authority would feature 13 members that represent Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and surrounding counties. It could collect revenues, issue bonds, and would control all airport assets. The city of Charlotte would have 90 days to transfer its control and all that property to the new airport authority.
We might all want it to be our asset. We might all want it to be the state of North Carolina's asset. This belongs to the people of Charlotte. And it belongs to their grandchildren and their grandchildren.
The proposed airport authority could not authorize new taxes or issue bonds that obligate the surrounding counties, but it would have eminent domain authority.
When you're online this week, find us on Facebook, facebook.com/legweek. Email us, legweek@unctv.org, and follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter name is @legweekinreview. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.